Napoli play anti-Italian football. They are very different from other Italian teams. The words of Eintracht coach Oliver Glasner the night before Napoli manhandled them in the Champions League. And, well, I see no lies. Napoli have been balling out all season. You open up your phone, check the scores from the weekend, and while football as a whole is unpredictable, a certain result in Italy seems to always be a foregone conclusion these days. The feeling of a team being inevitable shouldn't be a foreign one to the average fan, especially the average Serie A fan. But that feeling hasn't been associated with Napoli in a very long time. Actually, what am I saying? The Azzurri have had an inevitability about them over the years. The feeling that they would routinely mount a title push and inevitably crumble on the final stretch. Not this time though. Things seem different. I don't want to jinx anything, but these guys are flying, which makes today as good a day as ever to look back on their journey to this point and decipher what's brought them this close to the promised land. With that being said, what's going on over at the Stadio Diego Armando Maradona? Yo, what is going on everyone? Really hope you're all doing well. I'm Tinashe and welcome back to another video. While the top 5 leagues in world football are pretty open-ended with a unanimous winner still to be decided, it seems that things are pretty much wrapping up in Italy. After 24 games played with 21 wins, 1 loss and only 15 goals conceded, Napoli find themselves with 65 points, 18 more than second place Inter. In the Champions League, they topped their UCL group, dishing out 6-1 and 4-1 batterings to Ajax and Liverpool respectively. It's hard to imagine they'll let up anytime soon. Then again, things do have a habit of not going according to plan for these guys. Napoli have had a unique history throughout the ages. To say this is a storied club would be a massive understatement. Founded all the way back in 1905, for the most part, this football club has always been amongst the top dogs in Italian football. Of course, nobody's perfect. They have suffered the odd blip with relegations here and there. However, almost every time this occurred, they bounced right back. Take 1962 for example. Relegated from Serie A to Serie B 1 year prior, they finished in second in their first year down, gaining immediate promotion. They even managed to win the Coppa Italia while being in the lower division. And from all I could find, that's the one and only time that's happened in the history of the modern Serie A, i.e. 1926 and onwards, which is pretty good stuff if you ask me. They were relegated immediately upon re-entry though, so, you know, there's that. Of course, that didn't last too long either. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get across is that the trend of sniffing the top of the table but never reaching the pinnacle is nothing new here. Of course, that was until 1987. But before we move on to that, we gotta rewind the clock back to 1984. The Azzurri made one of the most iconic signings in football history, and what I would classify as undoubtedly their most important signing ever. Diego Maradona from Barcelona for 12 million euros, a world record transfer that beat out second place Diego Maradona, who moved from Boca Juniors to Barcelona 2 years prior for 7.3 million euros. Things didn't exactly work out for the golden boy in Catalonia. The same can't be said for his time in Naples, on the pitch at least. Napoli, who, despite being a prestigious club, were relegation candidates prior to his arrival. Within 3 years of his arrival, they rebuilt much of the squad and had a real champion feel to them. That feeling proved to hold weight. Napoli went on to win their first and second Serie A titles in 1987 and 1990. They did the double with the Coppa Italia in 87 and even won their first and only European trophy in 89, the UEFA Cup. Maradona was at the center of all of it. Interestingly, as a bit of a side note, historically, Roma and Napoli share an intense rivalry, the Derby del Sol, the Derby of the Sun. According to the players themselves at the time, relationships between the two sets of fans weren't always toxic, but after a particularly feisty derby day in 1987, Salvatore Bagni, a Napoli midfielder at the time, made the gesto dell'ombrello to the Roma fans, kind of an equivalent to the middle finger. As per his own words, this was a major factor in causing the divide. It's my fault that there's no friendship anymore. I regret doing it. Taking things back to Maradona. Despite all the success he brought to the city, his widely reported drug use marked the end of this joyful period for the Neapolitans. Following the World Cup, which was held in Italy in 1990, Maradona failed a drug test and was banned for 15 months. he never played for Napoli again. And apart from a Supercoppa Italiana that same year, the departure of Maradona also signaled the departure of success and financial stability. Post-1990, the club didn't do very much other than decline. In fact, by 1998, they were once again relegated and forced to compete in the second division. And the misery certainly did not end there. A promotion and re-relegation later, and by 2004, the club was declared bankrupt and folded. For a moment, there was a very real possibility that Società Sportiva Calcio Napoli would be a club that would one day be a distant memory. But in their hour of need, a savior stepped forward. Film producer Aurelio De Laurentiis. The man refounded the club. However, due to the whole bankruptcy situation, they were placed in Serie C the following season and also had to operate under the name Napoli Soccer, as they were technically a new club. The name was restored to SSC Napoli by 2006, and by 2007, the boys were back in Serie A. Also, because I know someone was thinking it, yep, as recently as 2006, this club was in Italy's third division. Also, 2006 wasn't recent, it was 17 years ago. And just in case you were thinking these guys lost support during their tumultuous period, think again. In their first season in Serie C, they were averaging 37 people per match in attendance to their home matches, more than most Serie A clubs do to this very day, and notably more than Napoli themselves managed just last year. And from that point on, if you know anything about rock bottom, you'll know that the only direction from there is up. With Napoli now back up with the big boys, it was time to get to work. And because the future often imitates the past, it only took about 3 seasons for them to start mounting legitimate title charges. There was 2010-11, despite ultimately finishing in third, 12 points off the top, they put up a good fight, thanks in large part to a rampant 23-year-old Edinson Cavani in his first season with the club. Man scored 33 goals in 47, and I remember watching highlights of this guy during his Napoli days. He was truly something else. The positioning, the finishing, the jawline, pause. 2 years on, they came even closer with a second place finish. Sadly though, Cavani was proving far too potent. Somebody was bound to get him out of there, and that somebody was PSG. 65 million euros. Not a bad chunk of change, especially because a lot of it was used to buy up Gonzalo Higuain, Dries Mertens, Jorginho, Jose Callejon, Raul Albiol, and many more. Now, I was a pretty big Higuain fan from his Real Madrid days, so I would say that this is around the time when I first started to really pay attention to Napoli. What I bore witness to in the coming years was nothing other than pain. Maurizio Sarri joins as coach, and Gonzalo Higuain scores 36 goals with only 3 penalties in a single league campaign, matching a record set by Gino Rossetti for Torino in 1929, later equaled by Ciro Immobile for Lazio in 2020. Napoli were in pole position as late as match week 24, but they just could not seem to keep the intensity going, finishing second. Higuain, who was considered in the highest regard by the people of Naples, was at his wits' end and was completely unsettled. After falling out with De Laurentiis, he moved over to the enemy, Juventus, for 90 million euros. This did not go down well with the Napoli faithful. In any case, over the next few years, Napoli continued to fight. Mertens, Insigne, Hamšík, Koulibaly, they all kept going. Having said that, if you're a fan watching this, I'd suggest you look away right now. 17-18. A record-breaking season for the Azzurri. 91 points in the league, with goals, assists, and passion stemming from all areas of the pitch. If you've ever heard of the playstyle known as Sarri ball, this season is probably the best example of it in full swing. High-pressing, possession-based play characterized by starting from the back. They were magnificent, leading the pack by game week 27. Alas, a couple fumbles later and Juventus eventually took their top spot with 95 points. Tough. While the team has continued to push since, it's been a bit of a transitionary phase lately. The players that carried them in the 2010s have gotten up there in age, managers have been coming in and out. They haven't really gotten as close to the Scudetto as they did in 2016 and 2018. At least, not until last year. After a 5th place finish in 2021 under Gennaro Gattuso, a new direction was required. Luciano Spalletti didn't exactly have a glittering career at the top level of football. In fact, he only started his career in his mid-20s, only ever playing in Serie C. Evidently though, this was far more than enough of a foundation to build a career on the sidelines off of. After impressing at teams with limited resources such as Napoli and later Udinese, eyeballs began fixating on him, many of which belonged to Roma. It was 2005 by this point, and to say that there was chaos in Rome would be an understatement. With Fabio Capello in charge, Roma were a genuine threat, winning the title in 2001 even. But when he left in 2004, all hell broke loose. These guys had 4 managers in a single season. They were under immense financial pressure and they finished in 8th, which might not sound all too bad until you hear that they were literally 3 points from relegation. This table was tight. Spalletti took charge for the 05-06 season and the impact was immediate. He employed an offensive 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 formation, high intensity, of course. As Roma never played with a traditional 9 during his time there, Spalletti is also the man that is responsible for turning Francesco Totti into one of the most iconic false 9s in football history. He never won the title with Rome, but winning back-to-back Coach of the Year awards in 06 and 07 says a lot about what you need to know about the guy's abilities. If we fast forward through the years, Zenit St. Petersburg, Roma again, and Inter Milan all became clubs that formed part of his resume. Great stuff. All the same, while he had won the league with Zenit on 2 separate occasions, like Napoli, the Scudetto was something that continued to elude him. Even in his first season with Napoli last year, he stayed near the very top throughout, even sitting at the pinnacle for long portions at the start of the season and looking down at everyone with only 8 games left to play. But again, it just was not meant to be. Right, we've gone over the important bits. So now we can come full circle and ask ourselves the question that's likely on everyone's mind. What's the difference this time around? In the intro, I quoted Frankfurt coach Oliver Glasner on the style that Napoli have adopted in the Spalletti era, anti-Italian, as he put it. Here's the full quote. Napoli play anti-Italian football. They always have great intensity. Without the ball, they play aggressively, pressing very high and with very intense counter-pressing. They are very different from other Italian teams. It's a fair assessment. This team very clearly have something about them that separates them from the rest this season. In fact, at the time of making this video, I count 18 reasons that separate them from the pack. I'm sure this comment was just a throwaway one during an interview. Lord knows players and coaches are practically forced into making comments to write headlines. While the stereotype of Italian football is that it's a slower, more calculated chess game, this is certainly not always the case, especially in today's football climate. Also, as we've spoken about so far, variations of a high-intensity, aggressive playstyle is nothing new to Napoli nor Spalletti. In other words, this was a good fit. So let's get into why these guys have been crushing the competition this time around. Systems no longer exist in football. It's all about the spaces left by the opposition. You must be quick to spot them and know the right moment to strike, have the courage to start the move even when pressed. Spalletti knows what he's talking about, and because you can't teach an old dog new tricks, it only makes sense that he has chosen to implement this ideology mostly within a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. Here's what the first string typically looks like. Alex Meret, who suffered from a couple of injuries last year and frankly seemed to be behind David Ospina in the picking order, is now the standard number 1, deservingly so. The Koulibaly-shaped hole was filled in just about immediately by Min Jae Kim. Not only a wall of a human, but a pretty slick progressor of the ball. He has the highest number of passes per game in Italy so far this season, with about 73 passes per 90. And they aren't just boring side passes. He sits in the 98th percentile for progressive passes into the final third amongst defenders in the Italian top flight. He's joined by captain Giovanni Di Lorenzo, Amir Rahmani, and Mario Rui in defense. As is often the case, the attack starts from here and progresses to one of the most dynamic midfields in the world. Piotr Zielinski, Stanislav Lobotka, and Zambo Anguissa. Anguissa brings that box-to-box energy. Zielinski brings the 10 energy, sometimes the 8 energy, sometimes the 6 energy. When he does the latter, he'll sit alongside Lobotka, who usually enforces in front of the back 4. Then we come to the front three. On the right side is one of either Matteo Politano or Erving Lozano. Players that each offer something different yet can both do the job. Politano, a left-footed winger, great at cutting in or going wide. Lozano, a right-footed winger, great at doing those things too. Both have the pace and unpredictability factor for those reasons. And then we have the two that grab the majority of the headlines, Victor Osimhen and Khvicha Kvaratskhelia. Osimhen's been around for a while now. Some might remember his lackluster time in Germany with Wolfsburg that resulted in a transfer to the Belgian league with Charleroi. Fast forward a couple years and he's all of a sudden one of the best strikers on the planet. Based on form, there aren't many above him if we're all being honest. 19 goals in 20 league appearances and counting. The guy is fast, strong, and sure, he may have some work to do when it comes to poaching in the box, but so long as Napoli continue to generate the sheer number of chances they do, he'll be fine. Which brings us to the next guy, possibly the biggest surprise of the year, 22-year-old Kvaratskhelia. Actually, this probably isn't much of a surprise to those in the know, I guess. In 2021, L'Equipe released a list of the best players in world football born 2001 and after. Here we have Kvaratskhelia at number 34, just below Gabriel Martinelli and Rodrigo. I mean, it's not like these sorts of lists mean a heck of a lot. All I'm trying to say is that he's not some unknown. He was playing with Russia and Rubin Kazan in 2022 before the invasion of Ukraine. He terminated his contract following the conflict, moved to Georgian team Dinamo Batumi before Napoli hit the jackpot and scooped him up before anyone else. He's been electric, exploiting any and all spaces on the left side of the pitch, able to pick the ball up anywhere. His touch in the box is soft, and when he tries to pull off an assist, his execution is pure gold. 12 goals and 15 assists in 26 so far. Unreal stuff. This Napoli are impressively fluid. Osimhen's ability to press from the front and have his guys follow up is a potent weapon in their arsenal. They've got the 1-2 quick interplay game on lock and are able to make the opposition chase shadows as they walk through them. They've got the long ball game in the bag, able to boot it high for Osimhen to chase if that needs to be done. Despite the fact that they have a core group of players, Spalletti isn't without options when rotations are necessary. Up front, Giacomo Raspadori and Giovanni Simeone offer great options for shaking things up, both able to finish with both feet and exploit spaces that the team inevitably creates. To the surprise of any Spurs fan that's watched Napoli this year, Tanguy Ndombele slots decently into the midfield when required. It seems like he's about to be added to the list of players that leave Spurs to win a trophy. It's a long list. He's on loan, but it still counts. They've already made massive statements so far this year. Beating Juventus 5-1 was one of them. It was 18 games into the season, and Juve had only conceded 7 goals all year in the league up to that point. Napoli scored 5 against them in 58 minutes. Juventus have seen better days, but before their most recent drama, they were experiencing a pretty impressive resurgence. Following their single loss in the league against Inter in early Jan, there may have been some doubters. After all, they were knocked out of the Coppa Italia a little later in Jan against Cremonese, a team that literally just won their first game of the season in the league against Roma on their 24th attempt. Sorry, Jose. Anyway, since then, Napoli haven't even faltered one bit. In addition to all of that, apart from this team's blistering form, one thing has pretty much made it obvious to many, including myself, that this simply has to be their year. The opposition is far too inconsistent. Like I've already said, these guys would most likely be leading the pack in any other season with this kind of form, but this time we have Juventus getting popped for a malpractice again. We have Milan, Inter, Roma, and Lazio all consistently dropping points and fumbling the bag. There is of course a mathematical chance of things not going how many of us see them going, but from where I'm sitting, the winner of the 22-23 Serie A season is inevitable. And there we have it. Let me know what you guys think about the league leaders over in Italy. Feel free to follow the socials. That's all from me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.